A friend asked me this week whether all my sermons talk about movies. I thought about it for a second and I said, no, silly. Some are songs from movies. That classic that Dennis just sang is from The Wizard of Oz. The spirit's moving in here, friends. Feel it. Which, in fairness, is actually a musical adaptation of a novel, in fairness, by L. Frank Baum, published in 1900, called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And there are tons and tons of theories about the book and what it's meant to convey. Mostly Baum pulled from some of his fears as a child and the places he lived and the jobs he had. It was an amalgam, really, of his own life experiences, from his most joyful times actually to nightmares that haunted his dreams. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the book, and then from the musical, and then the movie, and then more musicals and other movies produced from this kernel of idea, is just how much it is loved, just how much it has entered the heart of so many for so long. And stories have a way of doing that. Biologists, actually, and anthropologists tell us that we are many things as humans. Biologists tell us that we're apes with gargantuan, oversized brains. Some people who study mushrooms say there's a reason for that. That's another sermon. Anthropologists say that we are a species, the species that figured out really how to use tools, which, thank you again, Sue. The ceiling is amazing. Philosophers tell us that we are the group of mammals that is self-aware, that is self-reflective. People who like to make cute animal videos say that we actually evolved to be the one animal that gives the best head scratches to other animals, that our capacity for affection is actually what sets us apart. I had never thought of that, but it's kind of true. We're really good at head scratches. Humans are a lot of things. But among those many things that might help us stand out from among other species of the animal kingdom or the fungi kingdom is our ability to tell a good story. Indeed, many of the ancestors who brought us to this very place, to church, were devout followers of one of the most powerful, one of the most successful stories ever told, the story of that lone traveler who traveled to a new world, who toppled powerful leaders, who set a countless many free. Yes, they were followers of the Wizard of Oz. No, I'm just kidding. No. Of course, I mean religious stories or stories of a faith that grows into a practice. Stories are powerful. And the stories that form a basis for belief or a basis for faith are some of the most powerful stories we have. They are primal in the very, very real sense of that word, in that they are prime, the initial source of actions and reactions for so many. And in so many instances of a faith that has some kind of foundational recorded document, and its followers refer to those stories as their guide for their lives. But what is really that document that they are venerating, referring to? It almost always includes a retelling of stories. From the Hindu faith's Mahabharata, to the Kumulipo, to the Greek epics, to the Hebrew scriptures, to the Christian Testament and beyond, we refer to these libraries, these troves of stories today by their names, but they each are really a library of books, of collection. They're a compendium, really. Long before our writing, organizing, copying, head-scratching ancestors were at work naming things and scratching their heads, each of these stories was alive in the hearts, in the spirits, in the minds, in the mouths of the imaginations of their tellers and their hearers. Before any of them were ever set down into a written or recorded form. Some would say that by setting them in writing and then never permitting any changes, adaptations, or assimilations, it made those stories start to lose some of the magic that they used to hold. In Will Storr's new book, The Science of Storytelling, The author tracks some of the history of storytelling and how it came to be so important. He says that the usefulness of stories arose when elders of our Stone Age ancestors' tribes needed a way to pass on social information to one another to keep our Stone Age tribes together. His opinion is that stories started when language did. Our ancestors needed a way to share about who did well in food gathering so they could go again, who fell asleep on their watch, so maybe not so much with the late night watches for them, who was seen sneaking in and out of the cave early in the morning from somewhere where they shouldn't have been. He argues that the first kinds of social information were stories about what a community was up to, the buzz, what's happening. But stories became a lot more important for humans. The author's words. Some researchers believe grandparents came to perform a vital role in such tribes. Elders hold different kinds of stories about ancestor heroes, exciting quests and spirits, and magic that helped children to navigate their physical, spiritual, and moral worlds. It's from these stories that complex human culture emerged. When we started farming and rearing livestock and our tribes settled down and slowly merged into states, these grandparental campfire tales morphed into great religions that had the power to hold large numbers of humans together. Still, today, modern nations are principally defined by the stories we tell about our collective selves, our victories, our defeats, our heroes, our foes, our distinctive values and ways of being, all of which are encoded in the tales we tell and enjoy. See, ministers were attending coding boot camp long before any computer programmers were. Religions could only take hold of the lives of our ancestors because of the power of story shaping our societies that carried information that told the tales of heroes and villains and their dirty laundry. This helped to shape our ancestors, encoding these stories and their meaning into the very consciousness we carry in our hugely oversized, tool-wielding, head-scratching brains. As a Unitarian Universalist community, we do not take any particular stance of which of these stories is true in a historical or an eternal sense. Central to our way of being together is that individuals right here with us can share what they think about the truth of some of the stories that have made it to us from the campfires of our Stone Age ancestors. But as a community, we look to the stories as guides or as sources of wisdom that help us in the living of our days. As Carol so aptly said, the theme for the month of April is courage. Of course, more of us think of the Cowardly Lion from Baum's novel or movie when we think of courage than we do of the Tin Man. The lion, of course, asked God, or the Wizard of Oz, however you want to see that, for what? If I only had the noive. Yes, courage. If I only had the noive. I can always rely on Sue for the correct pronunciation. That's right. The lion thought he needed courage and nerve. It was the woodsman, the Tin Woodsman, who asked for a heart. And it was with that heart that the character could do a lot of things that Dennis sang about. He could discuss love and art, reenact the fabled balcony scene between star-crossed lovers. I don't know quite who that the voice was for Juliet there, but that's all right. He could befriend Cupid, or the one who shoots the arrows. And what are all of these things he wanted to do but stories themselves? Cupid, Romeo and Juliet, or Pyramus and Thisbe, but again, another sermon. And this all makes sense. We love our Cowardly Lion. Who couldn't? It's Bert Lahr. But at the heart of the matter is the question of courage. It's in the very word courage. Corps, from the French, means what? That's right. And it doesn't only mean the physical organ of the heart. The old French meaning of courage includes the innermost feelings and the temperament of a person. This likely comes from some writings and opinions of philosophers, including Aristotle, who imagined that the heart was the center of the warmth of the body, and then wrote in the 4th century before the Common Era that he believed the lungs doing what they were doing and other organs of the body were only there to cool the heart off, just in case it was gonna overheat. He said it a little more elegantly than that. I talk about the body like a car. Aristotle, it's got his own stuff. I like the idea that the rest of our organs are like the coolant for an engine in a car. The following centuries of investigation into the actual functioning of the heart led to the discovery that in some ways the lungs were interacting with the heart. Some theorized that the lungs weren't cooling the heart so much as they were adding oxygen to the blood that was pumping through it. This was one of the theories of Michael Servetus, a physician who studied anatomy among other endeavors like theology. One of the stories Unitarian Universalist communities tell is the story of Dr. Servetus, whose book on the errors of the Trinity was not particularly welcome in the theocracy of Geneva, Switzerland, where John Calvin had set up his little fiefdom. Calvin had Servetus convicted of heresy, tied to a stake in the middle of the town square, and burned alive with a copy of his book strapped to his leg. It's a story of courage, of taking one's own faith to heart. Even under the threat and the very punishment of torture and death, it was a bit of a wild time in Geneva those days. But we are sort of getting used to what wild times feel like, right? In an article published this week by the venerable Unitarian rag, The Atlantic, you might have gotten the chance to read Olga Kazan's somewhat comically titled piece, Why People Are Acting So Weird. I strongly recommend the piece. Kazan explains, and I quote, that during the pandemic, disorderly, rude, and unhinged conduct seems to have caught on as much as bread baking and Bridgerton. I know who watched Bridgerton by the laughing. One viewing of the Oscar telecast last week could tell you that, I suppose. The article quotes this really remarkable professor, Christine Porath. She's a professor at Georgetown in the business school. All she does is she studies and collects customer service data, and in particular, rude and uncivil behavior. There has to be an expert for everything. So Professor Porath said of rude behavior that, quote, the number one reason by far was feeling stressed or overwhelmed. The other thing she says is that in the pandemic, there's a lot of high risk with low reward behavior that we're forced to engage in. There's a ton of anxiety in the world right now. I said a few weeks ago that reports show that the level of anxiety people are feeling now is higher than any point during this pandemic, a pandemic that some want to think of as over, but we know it's not, certainly not for some of the most vulnerable among us. And even that cognitive dissonance is hard. And war is raging ceaselessly between two nations, displacing our siblings at a rate and at a volume not seen in almost anybody's lifetime who is living right now. And maybe it is the twin terrors of these events in the life of the world. Maybe it's only people learning how to be together again after pretty much having full control over their lives for the past 2 years. But something is up, friends, and it's contagious, literally. Professor Porath, the one who studies bad behavior, says her research indicates that people can spread negative emotions among a group. She said that in the workplace, people who witness rudeness are 3 times less likely to help somebody else. It's interesting. Some of us are on the edge, friends, emotionally, spiritually, and it's coming out. It's coming out in ways that I didn't think was possible to see in our culture. And remember that even here in our church is just a fair cross-section of the world, whether we like to think that or not. There's no doubt that a world rife with anxiety is here with us too, and that is heartbreaking and horrifying. We're children of story, all of us. We tell tales, we learn from so many corners of our consciousness. One of the great gifts of our faith, of Unitarian Universalism, is that we do not teach that any of these particular stories dictate an eternal fate beyond the ones that we live, but the result of this belief, or non-belief, is to give so much more meaning to many of us on a daily basis. In how dear, how precious, how haltingly beautiful each day we have to live for each one of us is. I know for me, it is this urgency, this precious resource of time that compels me to do with this time what matters most, what will be the most impactful to a hurting world, that compels me even to have this good impulse, though, can lead to anxiety when it's frustrated or diverted by a pandemic, by war, by violence, or by conflict of any kind. And our book, The Science of Storytelling, back to our book here, has a reason for this. See, psychologists and philosophers alike will tell us that we, as humans, this is going to come as a shock, love control. To quote the author, in fairness, he doesn't blame us. He blames something else. Brains love control. He says it's their heaven. They're constantly battling to get there. It's surely no coincidence that control is the defining quality of the hero of the world's most successful story. Not the Wizard of Oz this time. The star of the majority of religious sagas is God. God can do anything. God knows what's coming. God knows what's happened. And God has unrestricted access to everyone's most private gossip. I don't know why the author seems so fixated on other people's dirty laundry, but it seems to be a real thing for him. Some of us who study faith and psychology say that this is the reason people refer to the term God shot or God moment, for those times when everything seems perfectly clear, perfectly aligned. Storr looks at these and reasons that it's not always because someone felt that God reached out to them or revealed something or gave them some glimpse of insight. No. These moments, these glimpses, these peeks at the man behind the curtain usually happen in moments when a person feels great relief and sees great meaning in all the actions happening around them and all the feelings happening inside them. Or to be more blunt, they happen when someone is able to feel in control of themselves and the circumstances around them at the same time. In a sense, the person having the moment gets a glimpse of what they imagine God, the great hero in so many stories, must feel like all the time. But it's only ever a moment. The idea that we can both control our emotions inside and control all the events outside of us at the same time is what makes us Unitarian Universalists. No, I'm just kidding. But it is impossible. Some will try and try and try, but we all have witnessed what happens when someone loses control of themselves. Watching the actions of one of Hollywood's stars last weekend triggered many of us, but a step toward healing has begun with that star's acknowledgement of what he did, apologizing, and taking a public action to start to resolve the pain that he caused. Accepting that we cannot control our emotions and all of the matter around us, knowing this about our lives, about all of our lives, is the source of a lot of pain and anxiety. Continuing the work we have to do in the world takes grit, friends. It takes patience, too. And it takes courage. One of the most striking observations in Storr's book is the blunt summation that happy people are the ones who take all that happened in their life and continue to construct a story of that life that has meaning, purpose, and moves the plot of their life toward a beautiful, if not heroic, conclusion. Even amid the chaos that seems to battle us all. To do that takes real courage. And so I say to those who are hurting, lost, and suffering, you don't have to look far for hope. Courageous people are streaming across borders to find safety, for their families, for their lives as we speak. They face the chaos of uncertainty in their hearts and in the world. They wait to receive the heart of a helping world to begin to even hope to heal. They are writing a story that leads to hope from the chaos that threatens to take them. That is the bare fact of the matter, friends. And courageous people are right here with us, fighting to stop an unconstitutional bar to freedom for those threatened with the imprisonment by the state simply because they are poor. They fight to see the heart of mercy in a world that wants the poor out of the way. They are writing a story to end cash bail that leads to freedom from injustice that threatens the truly vulnerable among us. That is another bare fact of the matter, friends. And persons of courage gathered here in a community that remembers the stories and the cost of speaking out for what we know is right, in a community that remembers the stories and the price of answering that yearning to be free, in a community that remembers the stories and the value of peace that faith can offer, that sweetest peace between the swirl of our own feelings and the chaos of that spinning world, a reach, a grasp, a shot at something divine. Yes, persons are gathered here who know what matters, who can almost touch, almost reach, almost glimpse the story at the heart of all matter that maybe David Bowie told us best. We can be heroes, friends. We can choose to make order from chaos. We can be heroes. We can choose the tools of unity over the weapons of division. We can be heroes. We can choose peace at last over war. And we can be heroes. So may it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.